Today I'm going to show you how I've taken Ashika Island from looking like this to this, adding some much needed vibrance, depth, and clarity. We're going to be using a mixture of methods to achieve this look, the first of which is going to be NVIDIA Filters. I know that these can have a performance impact, but we're only using a couple to keep that performance impact as low as possible. To use NVIDIA Filters in game, you need to open up GeForce Experience, go to the settings area by clicking on the cog icon, and then just make sure the in-game overlay is switched on. So now inside of the game, we're going to tweak the NVIDIA Filters to get our desired look. You're going to need to press Alt-Z on your keyboard. This brings up the GeForce Experience overlay, and then click on Game Filter, and then move to one of your empty styles at the top. The first filter we're going to add is going to be brightness and contrast, and this is mainly going to help us out with calming down some of the annoying brightness of the skybox that can be quite harsh to look at, whilst also bringing up the brightness of some of the darker, shadowy, gloomy areas. So add in the brightness and contrast filter, click down the drop down arrow, and the first thing we're changing in here is going to be the highlights and shadows. You need to bring them both down to around -80. This is going to alleviate the issues I've just said. The highlights, as you see, it makes the skybox a lot less harsh, and then the shadows one, when we bring this down, it brightens up all of those shadowy areas, which helps with visibility quite a lot, but it makes your image look very visually unappealing. So to bring back some natural contrast, we're going to use the contrast setting. We're going to bring this up to what I would recommend around 50 or so. It just makes the image a bit less flat while still keeping the shadowy areas lighter and the light areas dark. It just sort of brings it all together quite nicely. To finish off with the brightness and contrast filter, I'd recommend you bring down the gamma to around -10 to -15 or so. This just brings down the overall brightness of the image just a tad. It makes the overall image actually a lot clearer on this map, so I think it's a necessary way to finish off the filter. The next filter we're going to add is going to increase the overall vibrance of the image, make some nice colors pop, as well as add back in some of the colors that appear to be missing in Ashika Island. Unsurprisingly, this filter is going to be the color filter, so let's add that in, click the drop down arrow, and begin tweaking. If I bring down the tint intensity to 0 so there's no tint happening, you can see that there are predominantly green and blue colors in Ashika Island, but there's a distinct lack of any reds or those kind of warm colors that are quite nice and visually appealing to see. So what I'll do is I'll bring that tint intensity right up so we're obviously seeing what color we're adding in, and then I'm going to drag this tint color along until we find a sort of red. So we've gone to sort of yellow, now we're heading towards orange, and now we're heading towards red, around 90%. Obviously, this is far too red, so now what you do is you dial back the tint intensity to somewhere around 15%, and it'll have just added back in some of that red color to the image. The last thing to do in here is to grab this vibrance slider and slide it all the way to the right. And as you can see, we now have a very nice, vibrant image with those red colors brought back in, and it's looking absolutely brilliant. If you're enjoying this content today and you're finding the information to be helpful, then please do consider subscribing down below. I am going for 100,000 subscribers this year, and having as many of you guys along for the ride does mean a lot. It only takes one click, so come on, go down and subscribe. Now, what most people would do next when it comes to NVIDIA Filters is they would add in some filters to sharpen up the image and push that clarity even further. And to do that, they would add things like details, which is down here. They'd add this one in, or they might add in the Sharpen filter, or they might add both. The problem with that is that this heavily affects the FPS in-game, and so I recommend that you just stick with the two I've added here. Instead, if you want to get your game looking as sharp as mine does here, you can see all the visuals, all of these edges are incredibly sharp and crisp. You can actually activate NVIDIA sharpening from within the NVIDIA control panel, and you get no FPS loss from doing so. Let me show you how you do it. By default, the sharpening option won't show up in your NVIDIA control panel, so we need to do a little bit of registry editor tweaking. Come down to your search bar and search for Reg Edit. This will open up the registry editor. You then want to come to this file path. It's computer, HKey local machine, system, current control set, services, NVLDD MKM, FTS. In here, you'll have all of these D words with their data values set at 1. What you need to do is find Enable GR535. Double click that. You just want to change it from 1 to 0. Once you've done that, click OK, close down your registry editor, and then reopen your NVIDIA control panel. Quickest way to open up the NVIDIA control panel is to right click on the desktop and then open it up from there. Then when you're inside, go to the Manage 3D Settings area, click on Program Settings, and then from the Select a Program to Customize dropdown, just make sure you've got the COD EXE or the Modern Warfare 2 22. Just make sure you've got the right thing selected here. And you'll now have, instead of what was the image scaling option, you will have an image sharpening option. Click on this, turn it on, and I recommend starting off with these values. So ignore film grain, leave that at 0.17. That just means that when we start sharpening up the game, if there's any film grain on the screen whatsoever, it won't sharpen that up and make it look really dusty all over the screen. Then put your sharpen value. My personal preference is 0.65. You can come back in here later on and turn it up if you want to. Once you've done that, press OK. Click apply that comes up down here and close down the NVIDIA control panel. To avoid any visual glitches or bugs that you might get from enabling this sharpening in the control panel, you actually need to head to the installation area of your game, then open up the shader cache folder and delete everything inside of that folder. When you next open the game, you'll have the shader optimization process start, which is the same thing that happens after you do a GPU or a game update. It usually takes a couple of minutes, but doing this whole shader deleting and re-optimizing of shaders means you avoid any of the visual bugs. The last thing I'd strongly recommend to really make the colors pop on this new map is to play around with the NVIDIA Vibrance setting. Now, most people will do this from inside of the NVIDIA control panel. You can come to here, you can go to Adjust Desktop Color Settings, scroll down, and you can change your digital vibrance, which will change the overall vibrance and colorfulness of your monitor. But there is a problem with this. This digital vibrance setting isn't just going to apply to Warzone. It's going to apply to every single game you play, and it's also going to apply to your browsers. It's going to apply to your desktop overall, which is going to throw off a lot of the color accuracy and a lot of the general stuff you do outside of your game. Luckily, there's this handy little app called Vibrance GUI, which I'll have a link for in the description. And what this allows us to do is set the NVIDIA vibrance level, as well as the AMD saturation level if you have an AMD card, individually for every single application that we want to. So we can have it where our desktop remains at the default color setup, no change, but as soon as we open up Warzone 2, the vibrance kicks in and we get a really colorful game. Also, as stated on their website, this application won't trigger any anti-cheat anywhere, so you're not going to get banned for using it. And also, it does not lower FPS. It's completely event-driven and will use as low CPU cycles that you will never notice the program's even running. To set up this application, you just need to have Warzone running in the background, then click Add on Vibrance GUI and double click COD as it knows that it's running in the background. From here, you can then set what in-game NVIDIA vibrance level you want to apply to Warzone. My personal preference currently, especially for Ashika Island, is 75%, which is way more than I would recommend for any other game that I've played on my PC, but Ashika Island is pretty damn black and white. So once you've done that, you can then just click save. I then also recommend that you enable auto start vibrance GUI and also affect primary monitor only, so that when you tab into your game, your secondary monitors, if you have any, their colors don't get all messed up. Once that's all done, you can then click the minimize button. It doesn't even show that the Vibrance GUI application is running in the background. It is actually hidden down here underneath this arrow icon, so you can come in here and reopen it if you want to make any changes, but it's nice you can keep it hidden. Then if we open up Warzone 2, it'll take a second to tab in, and we have all of the colors put at 75% vibrance without it affecting the rest of our PC. Now, to make sure we're getting the maximum FPS possible with this setup, you need to go and watch this video next, where I take you guys through all of the best graphics settings, along with Windows settings and config file tweaks to get your performance as good as possible in Warzone 2.